Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tip of the Iceberg Live, your live experience for talking Pittsburgh Penguins at Inside the Penguins on YouTube every single Tuesday, just about at 4 p.m. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, and today joined by Nick Horwat, basically Tip of the Iceberg round 2 today for the two of us. Same outfits, same chairs. We're coming at you, talking a little bit about some massive news that could be coming for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kevin Weeks certainly stirred up Twitter. We're going to talk a little bit about what that could mean and what he could be referencing with his post earlier today. We're also going to talk a little bit about Sam Poulin. We're going to finally give away the Jaromir Jagr bobblehead, and then we're going to answer any of your questions that you throw here in the comments section. So thank you to everybody that's already tuning in live. We're going to give it a little bit of time so people can get on in case they did enter for the Jagr bobblehead. So let's start it with the Kevin Weeks news, because he stirred up Penguins Twitter earlier today, posting the Clemente Bridge and just the eye emojis. Before we get into some of the things that I've seen being floated around, what did you think when you initially saw Weeks tweet out the Clemente Bridge, the eye emoji, and really just light everybody on fire in Pittsburgh hockey land?
I don't know what I thought. I just know that he's pretty prone to, when he has something cooking, he'll just kind of tweet the skyline or tweet, the logo of the team he is cooking with. It was just a run-of-the-mill thing, and I mean, we'll see where it goes from there. I'll be curious to see. I'll be waiting to see. And I mean, I'm trying to think back to some of the other things that he's done. I know he tweeted the Utah skyline long before that became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know normally he's big in goalie news too. So let's remember that piece of information for down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big in goalie news, and his recent tweets have all been pertaining to the NHL coaching cycle, because right now that is the biggest movement that could potentially be happening. So maybe it's something to do with that. But let me just run through some of the more fun things that people have been throwing out there throughout today. Our friend of the show, Doug Gladkey, he tossed it out to me. Maybe there's an outdoor game coming at PNC Park. Obviously, the Clemente Bridge having massive meaning to PNC Park, which is directly next to it. So would the Penguins be getting an outdoor game in 2025? When you already look at the schedule, the Winter Classic is set. It is Blues Blackhawks at Wrigley Field. Stadium Series is set, is Red Wings versus the Blue Jackets, one of the teams that haven't gotten an outdoor game yet. A Stadium Series 2 seems a little unlikely. They've been shying away from doing multiple a year. This year was obviously different because they had 4 teams all play at MetLife Stadium over the same weekend. So I don't know if I necessarily believe that. But Horwat, before we move on, would you be interested in an outdoor game at PNC Park for the Pens?
It's what they've been wanting, I think, for a long time, just because of that view. As much as a football field kind of works for the design of an outdoor game, and having it at Heinz Field, or the artist formerly known as Heinz Field before. PNC Park is kind of what they've always been looking for, I think. I know they wanted Beaver Stadium once for a rubber match between the Penguins and Flyers, but I think it was Penn State that turned it down. And as someone who was just at Beaver Stadium, I know we discussed this earlier today, not a great stadium, so they have dodged a bullet. That being said, PNC Park, I think it's just always been the Pirates end of things, not holding it up. But we'll see where things go. Again, I'm spitballing for the most part. That would be an awesome game to see, because just that stadium and the views it has, it's the greatest ballpark in Major League Baseball for a reason. Throwing a hockey rink on there could be quite fun.
While I do think that it might be a little bit easier to convince the Pirates now, simply because, well, the television rights are owned by the Penguins, essentially. You could probably force their hand a little bit. I think I'm good on Penguins outdoor games, right? I mean, they, one, don't perform well in them. 2, you obviously had the Crosby thing that happened back in 2011. Even the most recent one, that was when Tristan Jarry went down with his hip injury. So I think we can avoid the Penguins playing outdoors for a little bit longer, and that'd be fine with me. But some of the other things that I saw online and some of the other things that might have some merit to it, there's no All-Star game next season, so it's not the NHL All-Star game. However, there is the Four Nations face-off. And before the last time the Penguins or the NHL had players playing in international competition, it was the World Cup of Hockey, in which Pittsburgh hosted games. So maybe that could be the news as well. Pittsburgh hosting a couple Four Nations face-off games. That would certainly be good for the city of Pittsburgh and hockey in Pittsburgh itself. Perhaps it's the 2025 NHL draft, which is yet to be announced as far as the location is concerned. The 2024, obviously, in Las Vegas at the Sphere. So maybe it's that, or My personal favorite that's not pertaining to the actual Penguins as a team, as we'll get into a second, PWHL coming to Pittsburgh. That would certainly be an exciting thing that Kevin Weeks would be in the know about, that I'd love to see that be, what he's talking about as a PWHL team coming to Pittsburgh in their first expansion.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh's been floated around for a PWHL expansion for a little while now.
Mm-hmm.
This could just be another step further in getting it closer. They've always Pittsburgh's sort of always been in the options for that. I think they were even in the original groupings of possible cities. So if that league decides to expand, Pittsburgh should be one of the first few cities considered, because they've got the history of it, and they've got definitely a hockey fan base willing to support another hockey team here.
Not only the fan base, but the organization in and of itself. I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins have been a spearhead into women's hockey, at least in the city of Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas. I think they would be immensely, immensely involved if there were to be a team coming to Pittsburgh. So as Hemi Head said here, sooner or later, it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for the Penguins and Pittsburgh getting a PWHL team. But the real news of the day that kind of stemmed from this and might be pertaining to this, we had Rob Rossi of The Athletic put out a piece that kind of shut down some of the bigger rumors, saying the Penguins have not given permission for the New Jersey Devils to speak with Mike Sullivan. A lot of people went off on a tangent saying maybe it's a head coaching trade where the Penguins send Mike Sullivan over to the New Jersey Devils. Penguins in return maybe get a young player. I know I love Dawson Mercer over there, and he certainly plays well against the Penguins. But Rob Rossi of The Athletic putting that to bed, as he had his sources be directly Kyle Dubas, who texted The Athletic and said, there has not been permission given. There's not been permission asked. That is not a story. So it's not Mike Sullivan. But then Frank Saravalli of the Daily Faceoff quote tweeted it, said it's very good reporting here by Rossi, but also said, and I quote, varying levels of intensity about the future of the coaching staff as a whole relating to the assistants has contributed to this noise. So it seems as if the Penguins right now mulling over what to do with assistant coaches Todd Reirden and Mike Bellucci, which is not in and of itself news, but nice to know that they're at the very least not just happy with what they saw from the assistants this season.
Yeah, that's likely what it is. They're just looking at the assistants, seeing who can fit where if they are part of the plans in the future. I found it quite hilarious that, I'll say it, Nick Kypreos decided to start that rumor of Mike Sullivan, and the direct quote was essentially not being supportive of Kyle Dubas's, or not being confident in Kyle Dubas's abilities to run the team. It's been a year. I mean, and for what it's worth, if a coaching trade was going to happen, given the way Kyle Dubas has spoken so highly of Mike Sullivan and the way Fenway looks at Mike Sullivan, I would expect a guy like Jack Hughes to be coming in return, to be totally honest with you. It would need to be an impossible trade, just considering how highly he is looked at. And Rossi noted that if Mike Sullivan was to be made available, of course the New Jersey Devils would be interested. If Mike Sullivan was to be made available, of course 31 other teams in the NHL would be interested. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion. I think it was a nothing story. I mean, it was an absolutely nothing story. I would like to know where Kypreos got this rumor based in, but it was a wild thing that took off for a couple of days, and Rossi put it to bed real quickly.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was laughable. That's 0 for 2 for Kypreos and trying to predict Penguin situations this year. Just throwing that out there. He was completely way off on the Jake Gensel contract too.
Yeah. In not so many words, Nick Kypreos essentially said that is a story that he's hearing and it just won't go away. Well, Rob Rossi put it away, and he put it away emphatically with a direct source of Kyle Dubas, the Penguins president of hockey operations and general manager. So that story is not happening. Mike Sullivan being traded, Mike Sullivan going anywhere else. It seems like, as we've been saying all along, Mike Sullivan is sticking with the Penguins. But as far as Todd Reirden's concerned, we've had the conversations, obviously talked a lot about his future with the Penguins. And listen, I'm going to talk a little bit tomorrow about the Penguins defense corps. Something needs to change. And if it's not going to be on the ice, it sure as heck should be behind the bench. And Todd Reirden, listen, for what it's worth, he is probably going to find a job directly after he gets either fired or just moved on from in the Penguins organization. But that it seems to be the writing on the wall with all of this noise, but I just don't understand why, the cloak and dagger, if you're Kevin Weeks. I don't understand why you post that picture and you try to stir everybody up and then leave everybody on red for about 6 hours, still hasn't responded on Twitter. So if that is the case, that's just Kevin Weeks making, a mountain out of a molehill, something that's already been a story, at least within the city limits of Pittsburgh and within the fan base of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, that's kind of what leads me to believe maybe there is something more to it, that Kevin Weeks has something maybe no one's discussed yet. Maybe it is something just completely fresh in the mind, and who knows what it could be, and who knows if he's just kind of making an early call with this big Toronto Maple Leafs game that's going on tonight. Yeah. Austin Matthews might not even play, so Bruins in 5, it might be. So we'll see if Kevin Weeks follows up anytime soon. It'd be awesome if he did while we were here live. That'd be fun.
Be great. We love breaking news live or talking about stuff live. That happens.
Instant reactions are always the best reactions, guys. Remember that. So We'll see where it goes. It'll be something to follow along with. I turned his Twitter notifications right back on, so every time he tweets, I'm going to know about it.
There you go. So you'll keep me in the loop if something happens here over the next 25 to 30 minutes.
Essentially, yes.
There we go. All right. Well, I think it's time. I mean, it's been 12 minutes in. We got 87 people on the dot currently in the stream. So, I mean, what better time to go to the Jaromir Jagr bobblehead giveaway? Let me bring it up here for everybody to see. Everybody's names are in there that submitted it before we went live here at about 4 p.m. Eastern. Horwat, anything you want to say before I spin the wheel and we find out our winner of the Jagr bobblehead?
No, it's in this box. I promise you it's in there. I like that the bobblehead is in the center of the wheel you have here. This will be a fun little thing, and I promise it's all clean. It's all good. It has not come out of this box. And I'm excited to give it away to one of you guys, someone out there. And don't mail me back things whenever I mail it out to you.
Yeah, I mean, very true. I mean, we don't want Horwat getting. I mean, unless you want to send him like gifts and presents.
Don't do that.
Don't send Horwat anything. Good to know. That's all we needed to get through. So I think with 100 people on the stream now, let's give away the Jaromir Jagr bobblehead. I'm excited here. I love that I could add Jagr in the middle, but I wish he wasn't spinning because that's making me dizzy.
That's fun. It's hilarious.
The sound effects, I'm hearing them. I don't know if everybody else is, but Justin Dodd. We do have a winner, Justin Dodd. We will reach out to you on Twitter. We'll post it on Twitter. Make sure you direct message us at Ice-Burgh Podcast, and we'll get all your information and get this out to you as I screenshot it to make sure that I have it going forward. But Justin Dodd is the winner of the Jaromir Jagr bobblehead. Let me get back to where we're at here, and let's continue with this live stream. Obviously, talking a little bit about the Pittsburgh Penguins. We discussed Kevin Weeks stirring up Penn's Twitter. Let's discuss something else in Sam Poulin. Signs a 2-year, $775,000 contract extension with the Penguins, 31 points in 41 games for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, 0 points in 3 games at the National Hockey League level. Horwat, we talked about him a little bit this morning. Let me ask you a different question. Let me stir things up a little bit differently for you with Sam Poulin. How likely is it that Poulin ends up starting next season at the National Hockey League level?
At this very moment, I'm going to say it's pretty likely. I like the idea of him getting that chance, getting that opportunity, even if there are no roster changes to this lineup, except for the one that we are already pretty aware of in Jeff Carter. Then there's some shuffling you can do, and that would easily slide Sam Poulin right back into this roster. He has a lot of fighting to do with other prospects and other top names in the system that might be right with him in the race. But I'd say at the moment, without looking into further contract changes or additions or subtractions, I'd say at this moment he's pretty much right in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think that it's going to be similar to this past season where the Penguins are going to hope that they have a lot of players that are vying for it, a lot of players that are options for them in the bottom 6 next year. They're going to want to hold a competition like they did this year. The only difference is hopefully the players have a little bit of a higher ceiling. I mean, this year it was Vinny Hinostroza and Colin White, and I mean, Jeff Carter was involved in that slightly, but everybody knew he was going to win that position. Matt Nieto is still there. Mm-hmm. They're hoping to have that type of competition with higher quality players. Your Vasily Ponomarev, your Vili Koivunen, your Valtteri Puustinen, as well as Sam Poulin, maybe even Braden Yeager. So it's going to be interesting to see what and how they view that going into camp. Where do they place him at the very beginning of camp? Does he end up playing on a line with guys like a Drew O'Connor or guys like a Lars Eller, or does he end up playing on a line with young guys that he played with at the AHL playoff level, which is your Ville Koivunens and your Valtteri Pussinens? I think that's going to be one of the things that I've certainly marked off already is something I want to keep an eye on. But the last thing I want to ask you before we go to the questions, make sure if you want a question answered, if you have a question surrounding the Pittsburgh Penguins, drop it in our comment section, drop it in the live chat, and we will answer it here before we get going. Would you be comfortable if the Penguins started next season with Drew O'Connor, Sam Poulin, and Jesse Puljujärvi as their third line?
Yeah, I would be. I like that third line a lot. It's kind of got a little bit of everything because we know they like the way Sam Poulin can play that full 200-foot game. Drew O'Connor has that same sort of ability. And Jesse Puljujärvi's got a lot to prove yet again, sort of. So I like that line a lot. It's not the same pool party as if Pustin was there, but it's a ton of fun to it's a young core, right? That's a young group of guys right there too. And this team is trying to get younger. Focusing on those three, it's gonna be that would be quite a line. I think they all bring their own thing, and it'd be a defensive line, and that's the more you think about it, that's exactly what Mike Sullivan likes to pull for that depth. I'd be interested in it for sure because they all have defense, but also hints of offense that the bottom six is desperately needed.
I'm confused about Jesse Puljujärvi because I thought he performed well. You know, in the limited sample size we saw, I thought he performed well. Yes, were there some games where he kind of faded into the back and was kind of a no-show? Yeah, but he coming off double hip surgery, somebody who hadn't played at the National Hockey League level in, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months?
It's a while.
I thought he performed well, and yet there were times where he was scratched for Emil Bemstrom. Like, again, I don't want to bash on Bemstrom. That's always my go-to, but I always felt like Puljujärvi at the very least should have been in the lineup over him, no?
Yeah, every time Jesse Puljujärvi was in the lineup, he did something good, he would score a goal, and then you'd see Twitter blow up with, well, he should be staying in the lineup, and then like the very next game or a game or two later, he's out. I mean, they said early on it was they weren't taking him out to sort of continue his rehab through his off-season surgeries. There wasn't so much of that. So you're right. It was just a confusing situation of why is he sitting out then? Why is he missing so much time? Why is he missing so much time when clearly when he's in the lineup, he's doing good things? I would assume going into next season, he's going to have a higher role. He's going to have more priority. He'll be another couple months removed from his hip surgery. He'll be definitely, we are assuming, back to full health, especially if he ends up playing for Team Finland in the World Championship this year. Mm-hmm. We'll see where that goes. So he'll have some hockey to play, and if he looks good there, has a good camp, has a good preseason, next thing you know, maybe he is a good third line, fourth line option for the team. It's just a matter of working your way there and making sure Dubas doesn't fill the pipeline again.
Yeah, my big thing with him this offseason and why I think he's going to have an even better year next year than he looked this year is because he has that full offseason, right? You mentioned it. He had that surgery in the middle of the offseason last year, and he had to rehab that. Anytime you can go in and have a full offseason where you don't have to have a surgery, where you don't have to have rehab. Now, is he probably going to have to, be a little, is he going to be a little sore after the year? Probably still, because he came back, he tried to get into a game shape, and he played in a handful of games. But to have that full offseason, to be healthy and to be able to just build off of what you already have instead of trying to build back to where you were before, I think that's going to be huge for him. And that's why I think that a lot of people aren't giving him enough credit as being a middle six guy next year and not just a bottom line guy next year for the Penguins. But, that's obviously going to be something that we need to keep an eye on because, Jesse Puljujärvi signed that 2-year deal. If they thought that he was just somebody that they wanted to see if he meshed with the system, see if he still had anything left in him, if they didn't know, they wouldn't have given him the second year. So I find it very intriguing that they gave him that second year and that they go into the offseason now where he's kind of not been talked about at all especially at the end of the season there, because he didn't play in a lot of those games when the Penguins were on those win streaks. So what ends up happening? Do they bring back a Bemstrom? Do they bring back, who's the other guy I'm thinking of? Oh God, Jansen Harkins. Do they end up bringing him back because he's on an expiring deal? Or do they just say, hey, those two guys can go because we have Jesse Puljujärvi? It's going to be a storyline to watch, and it's going to be a storyline that I think more people need to realize is there going into this offseason. But we do have a couple questions here from the chat. Let's start with the Golden Doodles for life. Said that third line is a little sus. Who plays on Crosby's left side if O'Connor's down there? I'd start DOC there because it was on fire with him. In my opinion, if you're getting to the point where you can put Drew O'Connor on the third line, it's because you've replaced him. Meaning you've brought somebody else in that can play on that line. I think we all agree that based on the end of the season, Michael Bunting should probably start next year with Evgeny Malkin. Who goes next to Crosby? As of right now, it's probably Drew O'Connor, but I think the Penguins should and might try to bring in somebody to go up there and be on that top line with Crosby outside of Drew O'Connor.
Yeah, this does kind of go back to what we discussed in the podcast earlier today too, that I would say having Drew O'Connor start on that first line next to Crosby is also a smart move. There are no wrong answers with where you put Drew O'Connor in the lineup because he's that solid and can play anywhere. But I think so. I think I personally would also start with O'Connor on the top line next to Crosby just because we saw what it could do in important games down the stretch. And now if they can do that for hopefully a full 82, maybe you have some more progress to be made there.
Let's move over to NES Addict. Says the Leafs, they need goaltending, don't they? Always. Says you think they would take Jari in a trade that involves Mitch Marner. Have no clue how the money would work, but it's a wild thought. The money would also probably include somebody else going over, maybe a Riley Smith. I don't know if that would interest them. I don't know how the salary cap would work in their favor, but 5 + 5 = 10, and Mitch Marner's 10.9. So that would help the money a little bit. And I do think that Riley Smith might be somebody of interest for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But at the end of the day, let's get to the root of this question. Do you think that a Jari for Marner trade would be possible at all?
So I think it would. Obviously, there'd be more pieces involved. There would be probably some prospects, probably some draft picks, and probably another name or two on both ends of this. I think that's probably where if this trade were to occur, where things kind of start from, with Jari going to Toronto to be that goaltending help and Marner coming to Pittsburgh for the everything help, because he can play offense, he can play defense, he's young, he's fast, he's got all of it, and he's got that familiarity with a couple of key names already. I don't hate the idea, and that would open up questions to the Penguins goaltending also. Like, they would probably need to fill in things afterwards. But if the base is Jari and Marner, that's a good place to start.
Let's move over to Peter, who asks, what are the chances that Braden Yeager skips the AHL and is on the NHL team next year? I'll preempt this, Horwat, by saying Braden Yeager, because of the fact that he played one less game than counting in his first year at the WHL, he cannot play in the American Hockey League level next year, unfortunately, because typically it is you can play once you play 4 years in juniors, but you need to play at least 25 games for it to count as a full season. He played 24 in his first year with the Moose Jaw Warriors. So he wouldn't be able to play the American Hockey League level, but the Penguins could keep him at the National Hockey League level if he's ready. And I think, and you got to let me know if I'm off base here, I think he'll be given a chance similar to how Poulin or Polonamarev or Billy Koivunen will be given a chance in training camp. But I also think he's going to be starting from a step behind because they're going to be a little bit more protective of their first round pick.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible they're going to give him that chance at training camp for sure. I just think it might be a little unlikely, just because they're going to let him grow in wherever he is for another year at least, maybe, and then go from there. I could see a late season call up maybe too, if let's say Moose Jaw kind of fumbles out. But also, I'm not counting anything out. If he does look that good and looks that ready, he could absolutely vie for some sort of spot somewhere in the lineup.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Austin asks, if the Penguins keep Sullivan, which we all expect them to do, what message does Kyle Dubas tell Sullivan about playing more youth, given the fact he hasn't in the past? Horwat, what do you think that message would be? I have an idea of what it would be, but what do you think the message from Dubas to Sullivan would be in that instance?
It's really tough. I think the message is going to be, look, I've only given you youth to play.
Yep. That's what I was thinking, is like, who else are you going to play? You're not getting more veterans, Mike.
Yeah.
You're just not.
That might be the only message, is that I haven't given you any veterans to play. These are your guys. You're going to have to make it work with them. And I know that the idea that Sullivan doesn't play young kids is a long running joke, but might not have a choice this time around.
Well, he might not have a choice. And I also want to, give Sully a little bit of credit. It was a similar situation where he didn't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
But he played a lot of youth at the end of the season, right? There were games where there was 7 or 8 guys that were under the age of 24 in the lineup. Now, the deployment side, I think, is where a lot of people have a really good point in that. Jonathan Gruden coming up his first couple stints and only getting 5 minutes of ice time. Sam Poulin coming up and being started on the 4th line and getting 7 minutes of ice time. I think part of that is where the Penguins were at in the season. But I think going into next year, it's exactly what you mentioned. Hey, Mike, you know what your veterans are in the bottom 6? Nola Chari, Matt Nieto, maybe, and Lars Eller. Outside of that, you still have 3 spots left to fill, and you have no other veterans because we want to get younger. That's the message, is play these guys, because if you don't, you're not going to be icing a full lineup because I'm not giving you more veterans.
Yeah, and who knows if Raquel or Smiths are still around, so there's a few extra spots that could be filled in with younger guys. And for what it's worth, if we're going to discuss the idea of younger guys, Valtteri Puustinen played 50 games this year, however many it was.
Yeah, over half, over 41.
So he is showing the inklings of young guys are going to be in this lineup more often.
And it wasn't like Valtteri Puustinen was, can't miss, can't turn away from. He had a lot of struggles, and Mike Sullivan let him play through those struggles. So it is a good sign moving forward. Carl asks, chances of getting Jake Gensel back this offseason. Horwat, if you had to put a number on it, a percentage, if you were, what % chance of Jake Gensel returning to the Penguins this summer?
It's low. It's pretty low, I think. As interesting it would be, I think it's just going to be a low possibility. I wouldn't be shocked if the Penguins were in on the conversations. So I wouldn't give it a 25% just because I think it's low, but it could be possible.
I'm going to give it 15%. I think you have to give a little bit of grace of Sidney Crosby saying, listen, guys, I would like Jake back, and there being a chance that Jake is, open to taking a little bit less money, maybe shaving a year or 2 off of his asking price. But at the end of the day, he didn't do that when he was with the Penguins. I'm not sure what would change between then and now, especially considering the Carolina Hurricanes look like they're primed to be one of the final teams dancing for Lord Stanley's Cup. Grumble says, enjoying the stream. Appreciate it. How far is Owen Pickering from making the NHL roster? How far would you say, Horwat?
I'm not sure, actually. I know he's going to be another guy that gets that chance to fight for the role, but there's a couple other young, depth defensemen that are probably going to step in first. Honestly, that might be a better question for Jacob Hunturi, our fellow writer at Inside the Penguins, who is is much better at prospect predicting than I am. But I'd say it's still at least some time out. I know you were just telling me how it works if he could play in the AHL next year.
I'm looking it up now.
If he could, I could see that happening for him.
It's interesting because he played, again, it's similar. He's played 4 seasons, but his first year he only played in 23 games. So based on what I've been told, that would mean that he can't go to the AHL next season. But again, I'm not exactly sure. I got to double check that. The CHL, NHL, AHL rules are ever changing and very, as far as the latest I heard, he would have had to play that 25th game in his first year to be able to move on. But, I guess, looking at where he's been this season, obviously having a much better year than he had the year before. I don't know if I'd say he's close to making the team next year. I think especially because he hasn't had the chance in either of his training camps since he got drafted.
That's true.
You need to see what he looks like with some of these guys. And also the fact that he's a defenseman means it's going to take a little bit longer for him to develop. Let's move over to Jake and see what he asked. Which prospects do you think will start in the Burgh this fall? Again, Poulin, I think it's up in the air. Puustinen, if you consider him a prospect still, I think there's a large chance that he makes the NHL roster. I'll give you one, though. Ville Koivunen, I think, is a leader in the clubhouse for one of those bottom 6 spots.
I like that one. I was going to say Ponomarev because he really wasn't given much of a chance. And then if he can come back healthy and, again, have a good camp, have a good preseason, that'd be a good one to roll with as well.
Yeah. Brian also wants to know, foresee any realistic way of getting out of the Ryan Graves contract? I feel like we're going to be asked this a lot over the summer. Any chance there's a taker? Imagine the Penguins would have to eat salary. One, Kyle Dubas mentioned it was one of the first things he said last summer because everybody was talking about a buyout of, who was it last summer that everybody wanted to buy out? Mikael Granlund, Jeff Petrie, Jan Ruda. And he put that to bed and said, I don't buy out players. Yeah. He also said, I don't like retaining salary. So I don't know if he'd want to retain salary on Ryan Graves for 5 years. Not only that, he has mentioned several times, and this is one of the ones that I believe. There's a lot of lies that general managers say to the media and to the fans. This is one of the things he said that I believe. They want to see him get a second year, and they want to see if he can get his feet underneath him and come back better and be closer to the player that they thought he was when they signed him to that contract. Because as of right now, it looks horrible. So any realistic way of getting out of the Graves contract? Yeah, they could trade him to somebody that has not watched Penguins hockey over the past year, but I don't see it happening.
No, I don't see it happening either. When it comes to trading away Ryan Graves, you have to immediately look at the teams with a ton of cap space to spend. And those teams are few and far between. I mean, maybe Utah's got some space to kill, and they're trying to create a team, but I just don't see it happening again. Also, with the way Kyle Dubas put it, in that he's expecting a bounce back season next year.
Patrick Snow wants to know, do you think that Jack St. Ivany is a third pair right-handed defenseman next year? And do they bring somebody else in to play his left? Ryan Shea would be a great Chad Ruhwedel role replacement as the seventh man. Thanks for your question, Patrick. Horwat, what do you think? Jack St. Ivany, did he show enough to get that third pairing defense role on the right side?
I think he did. Barring any veterans coming in, I'd say he is going to be that third pairing guy. As for the left side or the seventh man, I still think Ludwig might be a solid seventh man. Just comes in, and when he plays, he's physical, and then going from there, it would be interesting. But Ryan Shea, I think, still needs a new contract as well. I think that's a signing that could happen any day too. It's just one of those Sam Poulin, hey, we're signing it now, we're moving along. I'd be interested to see if any veterans come in on both sides. Also, we have to remember Ryan Graves may be coming back for another season anyway. Mm-hmm. So he'll still kind of be there. As for that left side, it's all up in the air. It's all question marks. But for St. Ivany, yeah, absolutely. I think he'll be that guy.
I'll give you one thing. The one question mark that there isn't on the left side. Good thing for Marcus Pettersson. And yeah. It's a good thing they have Marcus Pettersson. He is their island in the middle of the ocean. That's what he is on the left side for the Penguins, and it's what he was for the defense entirely this season. Team Crusade asks, what is the biggest move do you think Dubas will do this offseason? And if you were the GM, what would your biggest move be? Or what do you think the biggest move, if you're trying to forecast it, what do you think the biggest move is for Kyle Dubas this offseason? And would that match up with what yours would be?
His biggest move will probably be something with goaltending again. I guess Nadalkovich wasn't the biggest move last year, but it'll probably be something with goaltending this year. That'll be the biggest, most notable move. Would it match with mine? I mean, ever since someone mentioned Jari for Marner, I think that's been on my head. So, yeah, I think it would technically match.
Yeah, obviously the goaltending it's been the biggest question for the Penguins for the last couple of seasons. Tristan Jari, I've lost confidence in him. And again, that's not the end all be all. I don't think Jari would give a crap, nor do I think Kyle Dubas would. But, I think that if I was the general manager, that would be my biggest move, is offloading that Jari contract and bringing in an outside name to go ahead of Joel Blomqvist going into next season. I don't know who that could be right now. Obviously, everybody loves the Boston Bruins goaltending duo. Everybody loves Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, and I think the odds are that they keep Swayman, especially if you look at the deployment this postseason. So maybe it's a Linus Ullmark ahead of a Joel Blomqvist. Maybe that's the biggest move, but I do think the biggest move that he could make is in the goaltending side of things, because I'm just not sure that he's going to swing big for a massive contract again in this offseason. If he does, I mean, heck, you give him credit for having the balls to do it 2 off seasons in a row, but another 10 million plus player, is that really in the cards for the Penguins? I'm just not sold on that as of yet. Gunnar Murphy wants to know, who are your picks for the first line left wing? I think as today stands, it's Drew O'Connor, but going into offseason, I haven't looked at the left wing crop. I've looked more at the center crop of free agents. I'm not exactly sure if I have anybody out there for that left wing side for Crosby. I think as of right now, it would be O'Connor, but I mean, we've brought up Marner. I've brought up Zegras. I'm not going to attach your name to that because I don't want to get you thrown in that fire. I've brought up a guy like Trevor Zegras, but I think on the roster, it has to be Drew O'Connor.
Yeah, I think on the roster to be Drew O'Connor. I believe Marner's a right winger, so if you wanted that right side to fill out,
Brian Rust can switch sometimes.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of that second line of being Malkin, centering, Bunting, and Marner. And I mean, people keep saying you need young guys around Evgeny Malkin to keep his youth around, to keep his scoring ability up. And suddenly you have Bunting, who's already a great fit, and a speedster like Mitch Marner. Again, we're just extending Malkin's career here too.
The top name for left wingers, Horwat, is a left wing / center. He is 34 years old, and his name is Steven Stamkos.
Oh, yeah. Well, that fits the Penguins, doesn't it? Old guy.
I mean, hey, Jason Zucker's a free agent, too. So if you want to go old guy number 2, he's there. But, I mean, if you're going to the unrestricted free agency, they're all going to be old. They're 27 or older. You're not getting anybody younger than that. Honestly, I'll say this again. And he did look good for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Anthony Duclair is a free agent, and he's 29 years old and certainly has the legs. Or 28 years old and certainly has the legs. So there's a couple of names for you. We threw a couple out. You know, I think that as the offseason goes on, you'll get a little bit more of an understanding of what the Penguins are looking for in that role and who could potentially be coming to the Penguins. Nice little comment here. Norvell Holmes says, Graves to Utah. They don't have any defense under contract, so maybe they need a defender in general. I'll say again, I don't think the Penguins are interested in moving on from Ryan Graves. I think they want to see what he does in year 2. But, you know, Graves to Utah, it's certainly, from an outside perspective, I think the visual certainly fits.
Yeah, it's on paper. It's if the Penguins are going to go in that direction, and I'm sure Kyle will call around because that's what he should be doing as a general manager. That should, the Utah Coyotes or whatever they end up being.
They're not going to be the Coyotes.
I know. I read Arizona Coyotes on my computer screen.
Yeah.
But they should be among the callers because, right, they don't have any defensemen on the NHL roster right now, or at least signed on the NHL roster right now. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of names in their prospect pool that might make it. I mean, they might not have a choice but to make it too.
Yeah.
But filling in a guy like with NHL quality or with NHL play under his belt, like Ryan Graves, for a team that is trying to build something, not from nothing, but is trying to build something new in a new town, in a new state, from the ashes of awfulness. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fit for just the sake of getting guys on the roster. And that's what they need.
Yeah, it is what they need. And they also are going to need to hit the salary cap floor. They got a lot of young players they want to play. Doan's kid out there, Dylan Gunther. You obviously have Logan Cooley, who unfortunately was not named to the Calder finalists, which means my prediction is wrong. Yours is still alive, though. Good job of picking Connor Bedard. Way to go out on a limb there. You might be right. So it might, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what matters. Team Crusade also said, what kind of contract do you think Duclair will look for? I mean, the last contract he signed was 3 years, $9 million, $3 million a year, and it got traded twice, I think, 3 times or something like that. So it's probably going to end up being something around that. I'm not exactly sure he's going to be going for that much more than that. But again, we'll have to wait and see. Captain Kirk games, we have a couple left here that we're going to go through. Do you agree this upcoming 2025 season is make or break for Sam Poulin? We talked about this extensively earlier today on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. So, you know, Captain Kirk, if you want a more deeper answer, go check that out. But I think overall, I say it's not because he's 23 years old. He's 23 and he signed a 2-year contract. So I say he's not. It's not make or break, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to go with no as well, just because he is 23. I said it for all the same reasons you said. He's young. He's got 2 years on the deal, and it still feels like he never got his first full shot at the NHL.
There's a couple questions here that go together, so I'm making sure I put them, all right away and right in the same spot, and they're going to be the last 2 questions we asked. Norvell has a second question here, says, good afternoon. Of the UFAs, who would you like to add if the salary cap wasn't an issue? Here's the thing. Mine, salary cap's not going to be an issue because Max Domi is not breaking the bank in the salary cap. And looking through the crop of free agents, the first name that jumped out to me is one that I wanted the Penguins to sign last year, and that was Max Domi. Third line center, can be that veteran if you want to supplant him there in the beginning of the season and then let the young guys come up and try to take his spot. a Ponomarev, a Poulin, even if it's a Jaeger, later in the season after the Moose Jaw Warrior season comes to an end. So I would say, and it's not going to break the bank, I would say you go after a guy like Max Domi, because also when that does happen, you get that third line center that does come up and does stick, and that's that young guy. He's somebody that can float to the wing and he can float up and down the lineup. Also similar to like a Michael Bunting, brings a little bit of that grit, and that's the same answer for what Jean-Claude Von Don asked. What a name. Says, what depth UFA this summer are you in city slicking milk drinkers? Okay, whatever. That Max Domi too.
This is the first time I'm looking at the unrestricted free agents list, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot of names I don't care much for.
Yeah, I mean,
judging by the age, the way the Penguins want to get younger, and just the overall skill that these guys can bring, and it's a slim group.
Yeah,
Teuvo Teravainen might be interesting, but also where would he fit exactly on a team like this? I'll tell you what, every time I see the name Jake DeBrusk pops out to me, and I will. But I mean, we'll see what Boston does. He might just stay there now.
I mean, that's been the story for his entire career. Boston doesn't want Jake DeBrusk. It could be a very good option for Pittsburgh, and people have connected him to Pittsburgh. Like, people in the know have connected him to Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, fences are mended, everything's good, all's great, no divorce here. Jake DeBrusk staying in Boston. It's going to be the same thing again, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. Here's why. You're not going to get him for cheap, though. Not even going to say it. Never mind. I was going to say Brandon Montour if you really wanted to kick Jackson Ivany out of the lineup, but he's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, Brandon Montour would be a great. Like, if they got Brandon Montour, I don't know what I'd do, but I would probably have a heart rate higher than any medical professional would suggest. I'd be extremely over the moon if they were able to go out and get Brandon Montour. But again, like you mentioned, where is he going? Are you paying that much for Brandon Montour on the right side when you already have Carlson and Letang and Pedersen and Graves all under very, very hefty contracts? So yeah, I would like Brandon Montour. You've piqued my interest, but again, where does that fit? I'm not exactly sure. But that is going to do it for this episode of Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and congratulations to our winner. Let me pull it up here once again, just so I get the name right. Justin Dodd is the winner of our giveaway of the Jaromir Jagr bobblehead. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. We will be back next Tuesday with another live stream. We keep doing these as long as we can on Tuesdays, but we'll be back tomorrow with an Ice-Burgh to go. We'll be back Thursday with a Tip of the Ice-Burgh. We're going to continue to bring you guys Penguins content because that's all we know how to do, baby. That is it for this episode of Ice-Burgh or Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live. We'll see you guys next time.